I literally feel like I was told things like, if you don't get good grades, if you don't have all A's, you will never go to college. You will never succeed.
Wow.
No one will ever hire you for a job. You will.
And you didn't think those were exaggerations,
Right. Like
when you were
it
told
felt
them.
like literally this is the most important thing in the world, and if I don't pass 8th grade math, my life is ruined. Welcome to the Empowering Choices podcast. My name is Joshua.
I am Lucas.
And I'm Erik.
Eric and Lucas are licensed professional counselors, and we are talking about 5 things that dads do that push their sons away. And this is our
2.
Yes, our second one of this. What is our second thing?
Being overly critical.
Overly critical. That's a good one.
So Erik had a bursting thought that we had to press record for before it escaped.
Without
being recorded.
I saw a clip the other day of a UFC fighter, and he was talking about, after he had won the match, he had won the belt, and they said, oh, your dad wasn't able to be there. And he goes, well, I called him on the phone, and he goes, well, how did that go? And he said, the first thing he said to me was everything I did wrong.
Oh my gosh. So he won.
He won.
But,
he won the belt.
But the dad's
He won
comments
the match.
were, oh, well, but.
Yeah, right.
Wow.
And he said,
God night.
So my response to my dad was, okay, so there's nothing good to talk about. And that seemed to kind of open up their conversation a little bit more. But so this is an adult man who is calling his dad, and he's getting this criticism, and there's something in our cultures around the world that somehow that criticism is supposed to be a good thing in front of anything.
Yeah.
One of my girls would tell me she was huge with soccer, and she would come off the field after a game, and she said her parents would come up to her, and the first thing they would do is tell her everything she should have done better, even though they won.
Right, win, lose, or draw.
Yeah, win, lose, or draw.
Always,
and I'm like, what would you like? And she told her parents, I just like you to just tell me I did a good job.
Just be happy.
Let's just, I don't want to hear those things I should have done better. And as I'm talking to the parents, I'm like, well, maybe that's a place that you leave for the coaches, but even coaches know, the good ones, that you can't just, drill right in on a person as to what you should have done good. Oh, by the way, that was nice that you had 16 goals, but you could have had 17. And
in soccer, that would be tremendous.
That'd be incredibly tremendous. And that's one of the things that, because I know I've had a lot of kids that, the grades, the grades are this high bar. And if you don't have the absolute grade that the parent, and it's both mom and dad, but if it's not an A, then, if it's not an A+, then, let's talk about what you did wrong.
I have such a much more relaxed thinking about grades than when I was a kid. Mm-hmm. Because as a kid, I was a straight A student for forever, I think. I got a couple of B's and stuff. But thinking now back on it as an adult is what did that really matter?
Mm-hmm.
What did it really... So in high school, it was you got to get into the best college or whatever, right? And I just went to a local college where it probably gave me some chunk more financial aid than a lower GPA would have gotten me. But again, actually I'm fairly certain it would have. Because I ended up redoing my SAT scores and getting more money because I raised those grades.
Which is different than just your regular A, B, C, D.
Yeah, I suspect a GPA would have done the same thing. But it's just okay, so if I would have gotten, X number of less dollars to go into college, I could get straight A's. It really wasn't that much of a stress on me. But for some kid where it's they're losing their mind to try to get straight A's, is that worth it?
Right. I don't feel like this is an exaggeration. I literally feel like I was told things like, if you don't get good grades, if you don't have all A's, you will never go to college. You will never succeed.
Wow.
No one will ever hire you for a job. You will.
And you didn't think those were exaggerations.
Right. It felt
them.
like literally this is the most important thing in the world. And if I don't pass 8th grade math, my life is ruined.
And that's
a bit much.
Yeah,
right.
That's one of the subpoints is that kids are emotional thinkers.
There we are.
Adults are logical thinkers. So when you're hearing these things, this is why we get clients who come in and say, I want to talk about how my life is over. I missed the boat, and I'm like, how old are you? And they're like 19.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm like, really? I mean, the boat only floats once.
Right.
Well, but I didn't do what they said to do, which is a lot of what you just said, because we have been getting fed an awful lot of if you don't get these grades.
Right.
When I was at Western Oregon, I was picking up some classes for my bachelor's degree, and I'm in an intro to lit class, and there's a guy in there, and he's in his late 30s, and he's looking kind of distressed, and I'm like, dude, I don't think they did you do the reading? Did you not like it? And he's like, no, it looks like I'm getting a B in the class. I'm like, okay. Do you have a stomach ache? Did your dog die? He goes, no. He goes, you can't go on if you don't have A's and above. Go on to what?
Right.
He goes, well, master's program. Don't you know that? And I'm like, oh, I understand. I'm like, and he goes, and I don't want to take this class for a fourth time. 4 times
Wow.
you've taken this class? He goes, yes. I mean, the first time I didn't do good, and now I'm trying to, raise it up, but I got to have an A to be able to really get this to an A and have it replaced.
Wow.
And I'm like, dude, are you going into medical school? And
Right, what kind of master's program you want to get into anyway?
No, I'm like, pretty much the only thing, unless you're shooting for Princeton, Harvard, Yale, the pretty much everybody else is going to be okay with a B in a master's program. And
I would wonder if if you got a 3.5 overall GPA, you're probably pretty okay. And if it's his only B.
Well, and see, and that's the thing is like, no, you just don't understand how it works.
Okay.
And so I'm like, okay, well, I went and applied for a master's program and a really good master's program. And on my transcript for my college years, I had 2 incompletes, 2 Fs, and 2 Ds. And guess what? I got in. It didn't matter.
Yeah.
It didn't hamper anything as to where I wanted to
They'll
go.
still
in the
take your
future.
money.
They'll still. That's really what it comes down to in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Now, medical is a bit different because
Right.
they have so many people and so few spots.
I don't know if in 2024 that's true, but
As to the medical part,
yeah.
or?
Well, I mean, medical, the whole industry is understaffed, so
yeah, very much. so.
they may take more people. I don't know that to be true, but
Well, and I do feel like some people are starting to see some of the change because some people were told, get good grades, go to college, get a degree, and you will be set for life, and you will make more money than you know what to do with.
When did they say this?
I heard that all the time in high school.
past 20 years.
Yeah.
The 80s. The
Oh, wow.
80s is where that really, became a thing.
Yeah.
And it was true. If you got a bachelor's degree, it didn't matter what it was in, you were almost guaranteed a 6-figure income.
Right.
Oh, so when you were getting a job in the 90s, that might have been true?
Yes.
And
well,
now
in
you
the
have-
80s and the 90s, yes.
Now you have people with master's degrees that are working
McDonald's.
Burgers at McDonald's, yeah.
doing
Yeah.
anything they can because it turned out not to work in their field.
Well, and
whatever
the
they did.
different things that were happening in the 80s and the 90s in the corporate world and the disciplines that the bachelor's and the master's degree represented, that you had these, kind of interwoven into, your work ethic. It all had meaning in those components.
Right.
It's not as true now here more lately.
Yeah.
I wanted to come back to we were talking about the emotional thinking of children, right? And if I have a 4-year-old, right? And she will verbatim on occasions, like something will go wrong and she'll be like, I'll never be able to wear shoes ever again. Whatever the thing is. And it's just like, where the blazes did you learn that from, child? Like, what are you talking about?
It's over.
I'll never have fun ever again. Holy smokes. Emotional thinking on display.
Yep. No, it's very true. And those are the pieces that you work with, as you know your child, to help that from setting in as an adult, because then it goes to huge catastrophized thinking.
She's able to come down off of that ledge far better than she used to.
Nice.
Right? Even at 4, she's starting to go like, because she used to throw big temper tantrums, and they're like shorter now than they used to be. But then there's the 2-year-old. So in any case.
Right.
You wrote this list, Eric, as 5 things dads do that push their sons away. Is there a particular reason why this is a dad and son dynamic versus a, I don't know, mom and daughter dynamic?
Well, that's a really good
I
question.
get accused of that all the time.
And this one was just aimed at fathers and sons.
Yes.
In the future, I'll look at fathers and daughters, and then we could look at mothers and sons and mothers and daughters.
But is this going to be in all of those lists too?
No, I don't think so.
So why is this one here as opposed to anywhere else?
Because that's the list I was working on.
Well,
That's not what I meant.
do you feel like dads have a harder, or men have a harder time stopping and celebrating something versus
Yes.
just we
There we
got to
go.
get to the next level?
Yeah,
and
I think that's what you were
Yeah.
headed for, but
Yeah.
I
Yes!
just wasn't gonna let you get there
Trying
easily.
to pull teeth, man.
yeah, because
I think someone said you were stubborn once.
I think it was me.
Oh, that's right.
I do think that's a thing that men often do, is it's just like, all right, that's, we're not going to celebrate that. We're not giving participation trophies. Let's just get to the next thing. But in reality,
You reliving your childhood there, Josh?
maybe in reality, sometimes you have to celebrate. I mean, like right now, my son is only 2. And we're trying to do colors, and we're getting some right and some wrong. And we really celebrate the ones we get right, but I don't chastise. I can't believe you thought that was purple. And that kind of makes sense with like a little kid. But then when they
Right.
get older, sometimes we forget that. And it's like, of course they need to know that. We're not going to praise them for getting the ball right. They should do that every time.
Well, and those are some of the philosophies that are intermixed within our society in America, is that, and there was studies done like in the 90s where they were focusing on men in the workplace, and do men in the workplace need affirmations, or is it, the kind of the old school idea was they came in, they did the work, they knew they did a good job. Why do I need to say it?
Right,
And
they
what-
got paid. It was
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah.
The study showed is that if you want to keep your male worker, you need to tell them they did a good job sometimes.
Yeah.
Because yes, affirmation is a human piece.
Right.
And there's this idea out there that if you pat someone on the head, that it's like helium will go through their veins and just puff up their head, and they'll just float away in the sky as if they think they're the king of the universe. I've had adults who came in thinking that was going to be the case if they got compliments. And we worked on, hey, it's a choice.
They were worried that someone might give them a compliment because they might like do bad things with it.
No, they were worried that when people gave them a compliment, that it would go to their head and make them arrogant.
Yeah, I think
Like
that's
it's a
choice.
cause and effect.
Right, as those
type of a piece.
they didn't have control
Right.
over whether or not it would.
So you're working with your kids and you give them compliments, and then you begin to see like-minded behaviors of their head puffs up. You deal with it.
Right.
Just like you're dealing with the tantrums with your daughters. You deal with that, which is what helps them learn how to be able to regulate that for themselves. It's some of these are just fears that we don't do it. And then because human beings are all these different slices, your kids may be the slice that needed those affirmations. They needed that positive reinforcement. There are differences, between the genders, and guys do well at times hearing constructive criticism, but you've got to know in the relationship when to be able to put those in. If you're just like that fighter's dad, you're just putting it in right from the beginning.
Right. Dad, I'm calling you because yeah, but you didn't.
Yeah, I saw your fight.
Freaking won though. Like, what are you talking about? Can we at least
Right.
stop on that for 12 seconds?
Exactly. And so some of those critical pieces start in childhood. I've had lots of kids say, couldn't they have just said I did a nice job, and then if I wanted to hear the other things, we could have talked about it later?
Well, how many people will comment about like, I wish my dad would have told me he was proud of me?
Yes.
And that's essentially
Huge.
the thing that we would recommend. Like, yeah, do that instead of again, we have our comment here of being overly critical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure.
It's almost like you should put in some kind of policy in play. I mean, if this is how
You
guys
put a
think.
policy into your.
Well, I think about policy, but
the business owner talking over here, man.
You should to celebrate, and then if we do want to do a debrief or do something like that, put some distance between it. Like you just won the race or you just hit the thing. That's not the appropriate time for the hey, if you had just done whatever. And you almost have to discipline yourself. And I think this is another area where just because that's how your dad raised you or did whatever doesn't mean it was a great idea, and you don't need to necessarily continue that. It may be the only thing that you knew, but that doesn't mean that now you now have a chance to change that.
Exactly.
And do something more positive.
So evaluate it, and if that would have been nice for you to have heard certain things or had certain things, make sure you retool the relationship you have that cuts most of that out and puts in more of what you think would have been really good for you.
Oh, I'm remembering. I was trying to remember where it was that I had heard this from. It was one of my clients talking about how their dad communicated to them. And no matter what they had done during the day, dad would come home and start nitpicking the things they hadn't done. And the client's comment was like, could he have not at least just celebrated for a second, like the good thing that did happen? Right. Please. Yeah. But it was always, again, like that fighter you were talking about. It was like something good happened, but, and it's that but that really kind of like cuts people's legs out from under.
Yes, you did all the laundry, but you dropped a sock over here, and that's unacceptable.
Or like, but you didn't mow the lawn.
Right.
Yeah, it's like you did all of this, but there's another thing that's still like it's not all. Is anyone ever perfect in all places at all times? Like, good grief.
And I'm just going to throw in, this is an art. And so you evaluate those different situations at different times.
Right.
One thing to take away maybe is that if you're giving a compliment, it's kind of like giving an apology. If the sentence has a but, then everything after the but disqualifies to the hearer everything before the but. And so, keep that in mind. If you want to give a compliment, just give a sentence with a compliment. Hey, you did a nice job doing the laundry.
And then stop talking.
And then later on, you just might go, oh, look, hey, there's a sock here. How'd that get here?
Yeah.
What do we do with that? Or you just stop and pick up the sock.
Right. Depending on,
it's just, we don't have to be that nitpicky on perfection.
Right.
In different ways. And that's going to, and some of that goes back to what you were talking about, Josh, in, how you were raised. I worked in a group home for adolescents one time, and one of the toughest boys they had, was doing so well he could bring his Legos out to the living room, and man, he was building. And this one particular staff had to go to the dentist, and so he left to go to the dentist. And a couple of hours went by, and then this kid is still building, and he's having a great time, and he's engaging with other people and
checking all the boxes.
The boxes, doing well. The staff came back in. He looked at the living room. His eyes got big. He went to the right. He went to the left, and he goes, "It's been 2 hours. This stuff needs to be cleaned up. Why is it still here?" Sent the kid right through the roof in behaviors.
Because you were in a behavioral, like this kid had a history anyway.
Yep.
Poke them buttons.
And so when I was able to, because the guy's like, wait, what did I do? And I'm like, let's talk about that.
Right, hold on,
because he's a very experienced staff. He's very good. He's very connected to that particular kid as well. And I'm asking him why he thinks 2 hours is the time limit. And, is that in the policies? And he's like, no, there's no policies for that. He goes, that's just my growing up. I could only have things out 2 hours at a time at best. And then my parents would do the same thing that I just did. It was time for it to go away. And why didn't I already know that?
And why didn't I already know that?
And I said, well, how did that feel? He goes, I hated it. And he goes, and I see what I just did. He goes, I got some work to do. And so he went to go work with the kid, and he apologized, and, he was able to bring him back up. And he actually put himself in the living room for the rest of the afternoon with the boy and the Legos. And I would come through and I'd be like, dude, how you doing? He goes, it's hard.
It's your face.
It's hard, but I'm making it. And the kid's like, no, I'm making it, but
That's funny. Yeah, well, that's pretty cool, because that is one of those situations where like I was saying, you think a certain way because you were raised that way, but that does not mean that is actually good, and that's kind of stopping.
It was just the way.
Evaluation. So, yeah, well, this has been a great look at our second part of these things that dads do that push their sons away. If you haven't checked out the first one, definitely make sure to do that. Subscribe to this wherever you're listening to it, and we will see you on the next episode.